So I guess we're going to start by telling our audience that this week we are discussing Shadows by John Cassavetes, which was put out in 1959 in order to discuss low budget and independent films. So my name's Olivia Pedrick.
I'm Alex Tozian.
I'm Abby Rhodes. My video is not on right now because my Wi-Fi is really terrible and I have a crappy computer. Just a little heads up.
And my name's Katie Rich.
Very nice. Okay, so who would like to talk about Shadows a little bit, kind of about its gist, if we can even do that, because it's like kind of hard to choose a plot. So
I can try to describe it.
Yeah,
like
go
the
ahead.
best way possible. So it originally started as an improvisation, and so I believe it was originally performed in 1957 or 1958, one of the two. And so the director, he sort of outlined the film and like the direction he wanted the film to go into, but he had actors perform each scene using improvisation. And so they improvised all of the dialogue in the film, and while someone was sort of writing a script while they were performing it, and they later decided to turn it into a feature film with that script that they wrote during the improv scene. And so the story follows three siblings. I believe they're all siblings.
Yeah,
African American siblings. A jazz musician, and the other one is, what is he? He's like sort of, I want to say
he plays the trumpet.
He plays the trumpet, but he's also like involved, I want to say, in like a gang or something like that. Maybe not a gang, but some sort of shady business.
He's always getting into trouble.
Yeah, and then their little sister, who is very light-skinned, and so she passes as a white woman, and she is a writer. And so it mainly follows her. Her name is Layla, and her like relationship travels.
Yeah, three different stories, all intertwined by a family relation. But
Yeah.
what I think is I just feel like this needs to be pointed out before we keep going with the plot, is that Abby did some research, and you said that originally the trumpet player was supposed to be visibly black, and he is not.
yeah, I literally couldn't tell until the movie continued.
Yeah, I had no idea. I don't think that the actor's ethnicity is, I just don't think that, I think he's white. So that confused me in the sense that the plot was about racial identity, and like having, that it was mostly around the sister and how she was the one that could pass, but they couldn't. So they did the, stereotypical, like, hardworking, music aspiring jobs.
Totally. And I think like part of that, it's important to mention while we're talking about low budget films, I think it's important to talk about how the movie itself was in black and white, which made it even harder to tell. It was probably on purpose because it was a low budget, but I'm sure we could take some metaphorical pieces out of that. What do you guys think?
I think so. I think the whole idea of like black versus white, that definitely is something. Sort of like when we were analyzing Night of the Living Dead, how like that was in black and white. And you can say like there's some commentary on race there, just because like the central character is a black man and everyone else in the film is white. There's definitely something that we can talk about with like race in that situation. Just like metaphorically, not everything is black and white. I guess you could say, if someone wants to build off of that.
Yeah, I think, well, there's definitely an aspect to it that's like it's low budget and black and white was just cheaper to film. But also with the budget part, black and white, you have to worry less about like lighting and mise en scène and just the setting all around. Like you don't have to worry about like colors clashing or like, you know, colored symbolism, even if that's not the biggest thing ever. But like, you know, if there's like a lot of yellow in a scene, it's like people are going to notice, but you don't have to worry about that. So that saves time and money. And I think on the thematic side of it, I agree to a point that like it has significance within the film, but also like that one brother being like clearly white, but still being portrayed as a black character, I think kind of throws a wrench into that, because at that point it's not like the literal black and white symbolism isn't being like looked at as a super important thing to like be consistent with, I guess. If that makes sense.
That makes sense, and I think it to me it came off of like as like it's just as hard for us to tell who's black and white than it is as it is for the characters in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that sort of brings up something to think about, like how do the characters feel in terms of their race? Like, is that sort of adding to their character depth, maybe like making them think of like what is their place in this world? How do I fall into a certain group? And that's sort of like a conflict in the film. Like Layla's conflict is she is white passing, but she is a black woman. So like what is her place in the world?
Yeah, I think it's interesting how I actually believe, looking at the actress, what I found interesting is also I looked up the cast, and most of the cast, you know, just takes their actual name and just uses that. Um, but I have, there's no doubt in my mind that she does not identify herself as a black woman at all.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off that point. Like, I don't know if I'm right here, just because I don't fully remember, but like in the scene where Tony is first meeting like Layla's family, it's like very obvious. Like instantly, Hugh knows like what his reaction's about. Like he was like, "Oh, he just realized Layla's black, and now he doesn't really want to like hang out with her anymore." So he's like, "Go away, you're just gonna hurt her." But what I don't fully remember is what like Layla's thinking in that scene, because like since she is white passing, like she doesn't have to be as aware of her race like in society, because it's still a detriment to her, unfortunately, but it's not like as much of one because like she's white passing. So what I'm not sure about is like how she reacts in that scene, and if she's aware or if she just thinks Tony's acting weird.
Speaking of that, like I wanted to ask you guys what you thought about the like sex scene, because I couldn't tell if her uncomfort was from her being afraid that he's going to find out she's black, or her being super upset that she lost her virginity in the way she did. Like I could not figure it out. And because it seems to me like mostly that she was uncomfortable in the way that she felt like she had to stay with him because he took her virginity. And it was just a super like weird
It was
scene.
horrifying to watch.
Yeah, I got some really rapey vibes.
Very. Oh, that was completely non-consensual. I mean, he needed to take a sex education class, but it didn't even occur to me that was her fear, though. That's really interesting, Olivia, because I never even thought about the fact that she might actually be in love with him, and she's scared that since they're getting closer, he might leave her if he finds out about her true identity. That never crossed my mind. But I think I'm sure that was part of it, or part of what made her so nervous. I think that all of that whole scene just kind of stemmed from ignorance and fear to me. And I don't even know how else to describe it. But another low budget wise is that, you know, most of their talking, like when it was just the two of them, they were talking in places that didn't really have a very detailed or particular background. You know, it was his apartment,
So true.
car, her apartment, you know, like a small room. It's nothing, like you couldn't really tell them apart, and that was purposeful, I think.
And sort of, this is kind of on topic, but also like on a tangent. I think like the theme of alienation is really prevalent in the film. Just like the fact that Layla doesn't really know where she stands in terms of her race, and then also thinking about the brother who is a trumpet player but like involved in a shady business. He doesn't know his place in the world either. And then the other brother who is a struggling singer, like he can't book any big venues. Just like the theme of like alienation is really prevalent in the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
very bleak background can make you feel a sense of like, where am I in this world, you know? It's like it's really helping you get a sense of like how the characters are feeling.
Absolutely.
Totally.
I think another.
Sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
Okay, sorry. I think another part of that both adds to that atmosphere and saves money is the fact that there's not really sound effects. Like when the characters are walking, we don't hear them walking, and usually what we do hear is like a musical soundtrack, but it's like almost always just like a saxophone or like a trumpet or something. So that like single instrument also builds into that like theme of alienation because it's just like this one lone instrument playing a song with nothing else around it. And like I don't know, the whole time the soundtrack was just really striking to me since it wasn't like orchestral. It was just like one single instrument.
Absolutely. I agree. It was so eerie to me. And that was one of the things I wrote down is that like the only other like musical part was when they had the girls in the beginning singing in the background practicing. It was so horrible.
It was
Like,
horrible.
so bad that I think they put that and layered that on top of the guys arguing. So maybe that was just trying to make us more anxious watching it or whatever, because it felt like it was like building up, like it just felt so uncomfortable. And then we heard it again when they kicked one of the brothers out, the singer out, like so that they could sing, because all they cared about was like a sex symbol. Like they were like, oh, just have the girls come in. Exactly. Yeah. Who cares about their voices?
Exactly. Who cares? It's just these
But
girls. What?
Oh, sorry. I was gonna ask a question.
Go ahead.
So like when you all were watching the film, did you get a sense of like loneliness? I want to say, just when I was watching the film, it sort of felt very lonely. I don't really know how to describe it exactly, but like, I guess like the feeling of being uneasy and also like lonely in your situation. And so you can also bring that back again to alienation with Layla and like how she feels about her race, what is her place in the world. I just wanted to know like your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I definitely also felt that, and I think kind of going back to sound effects, like one thing that really added to that for me was the fact that there wasn't really ambient sound. Like when they're out on the city streets of New York, like obviously that's a very noisy environment, but all we're hearing is their voices. So like that is pretty unsettling because it's like, why is the background silent when there's definitely sound there, like in reality?
Yeah, and even like some of the things that you'd think you should be able to hear, like being punched in the face, or you know, like it was just silence. Sometimes it was like, you know, layered with the music, like going back to what you said, and it just kind of reminded me, because it was black and white it almost reminded me of like how they would do it in silent films, instead of using actual like sound effects, they just use an instrument to indicate, okay, this is bad, they're hurt instead, which I thought was, I don't know, I mean, I guess it's kind of a low budget thing.
Yeah, like still on that exact same track, going off of what you and Abby said, like the low budget kind of went into I was gonna say two things, but one thing was when they went into the museum, like the outdoor museum, that was definitely like a budget choice because like there was no they like it looked like they went during closed hours because there was nobody there. It was outdoors, so there wasn't like much lighting that they wouldn't need to put unnatural lighting or anything like that. And also, there was no one there, so it felt like super eerie again. Like it felt super lonely and just weird. And like they were like talking horribly about this statue woman, like about her body, and it just was all very weirdly uncomfortable.
Like when they were talking about the statues, it all felt very superficial to me. Like the what's his name, the brother's friends were talking about like how the statue looked and like making fun of the statues, whereas the brother was like trying to find the deeper meaning in it. And so I just think that there's also like themes of superficiality in there, like based on looks. So like the two white men that Layla had dated, they only liked her for her looks. Like they thought that she was beautiful and stuff. Like the writer, white man, didn't appreciate her as a writer. He more appreciated her because he thought that she was beautiful. And I think that there's definitely a lot to be said about like superficiality and like what it means to be a person on the outside versus on the inside.
Speaking of, what did you guys think of like them talking like that? Did you think that was part of the improvisation? Like you said, when they were in the museum and they were trying to be a couple of them were trying to be as sophisticated as they could, or like faking their sophistication, while the other was like, no, screw this, these statues are so ugly. Like, did you think that was part of the improv, or do you think the director like told them to do that?
Ooh.
I think maybe they could have been directed on how they should act, but I do think that what they said was definitely improvisation. Like I just think it was a mixture of both.
It definitely was, because some of it didn't make sense. Like when Tony came in, that was the moment to me where everything just got so like tense for every character, for everybody. It went from kind of like slow, okay, I'm sort of starting to see themes, to explosion. Like all of these conflicts are popping up and people are just letting it go. And when he came in, it was sort of assumed that, this was after she was raped, technically. And this guy is leaving because of her brother's race. He's realizing. He's like, oh, I'm a racist. I have to leave. And and the dialogue between him and those two, Hugh and Tony, just did not make any sense to what they said before or to the situation. Like it just didn't make sense. And I felt like they were completely ignoring the fact. I mean, like the movie as a whole in that scene was ignoring the fact that she had just been through this traumatic experience, but that doesn't matter right now. What matters is he finds out she's Black.
Exactly. I totally agree, because he also started crying. Did you notice that? Like he started like literally crying, and I couldn't.
Tony?
Yes, yeah, he was started crying because it was maybe because he like had just slept with a Black girl. Maybe that was kind of why. And like he was just so, I don't know, disgusted with himself because he's, racist in the 50s. But yeah, I thought that was also very like kind of out of nowhere and just out of place.
So maybe this is a bit of a like meta point to bring up, but I get the sense during that scene that like the director just told them to like make it intense almost. So like Tony
Yeah.
just kept like trying to escalate it, but he like ran out of things to say because like he just kept repeating like, "You said you want me to leave," and like he was in his face
That's
at the door
so
like,
true.
"Go," and it's like logically, why would you just stay there and say like you want me to leave instead of leaving? So
And
I
also,
feel
he
like
wanted to leave. He was the one who said he
yeah.
wanted to leave. So that
So I just,
Also, can I just mention this has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So
what?
it depends on who agrees with Rotten Tomatoes and thinks it's like
Let's see.
kind of a good source of I don't know, commentary, but it has 100%, and I watched it and I was like, I don't know.
Was it the first improv film ever released?
Oh, like because it was experimental, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Like maybe people who, like Hugh,
Yeah.
like someone who really studies film would kind of respect because it's so new and it's so unexpected.
We're not sophisticated enough yet.
No,
You have to
not
be
yet.
a little farther than Film 101, maybe, to get
our
it.
brains
Give it a couple years.
Kind of, unless anybody else wants to say anything, I kind of wanted to change the subject a little bit. That's cool. So, I thought it was really interesting in the ways that, yes, it was like a lot about race, but it also had a lot of commentary on like just showing women that didn't care what people thought about them. So some examples were when they were at that like book event, there was two women who were speaking over two men, which is rare even today, like who were very, very educated, and you could tell that they were very educated. So there was that, and then there was her just basically saying, because he said, oh yeah, Tony said, who do you belong to the sister, and she said, I belong to me, like, and I don't know, I just want to like point that out, if anybody has any comments on that.
I had something to say. I kind of liked how she said that, and then like it's sort of the idea of like her Layla. So like Layla started out as a very independent character, and then as she started dating that white man, she became more and more dependent on him, and like she felt like she needed him. And then after he took her virginity and he left her, she was like seen moping around her room, not knowing what to do and like how to go on with her life. But when her friend takes her to that party and her like last love interest, the black man, asked to take her on a date, it's like she's found her confidence again. It's she like figured out that she is independent and she can do what she wants, and so she starts like giving him a hard time, like making it a challenge for him to take her on a date. Even when she finally agrees to the date and he shows up, she makes him wait for 2.5 hours or something like that. And so I just really liked how at the end she found her confidence, and I think that also has something to do with her finally figuring out her place in like the Black community. And I just really liked that message, and so she found her place again and she found her confidence.
I completely agree with that. I think that that's the best part of, she's the best character. I think that she was totally above her time. Like, I think that this, in a way, it really was a pioneer kind of film. I just looked it up. The director was the first one to ever use improvisation. So I imagine that this is the first movie that was ever released that was completely improv.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah, I think that's why it's just so new and it's so unheard of. I think that they were just kind of getting used to the idea. Who knows how they like really went about the steps, especially when they were doing this from pulling it out of air. But yeah.
I think it's interesting to note, I guess, like the evolution of it also, because like today, when I think improv, like I think of like AAA like comedy movies where it's just like a bunch of funny actors trying to be funny. But then like the first use of improv in like a full movie, it's like a more serious film about like that makes comments about society and stuff. So I just think that's like an interesting path it took, I guess, in movies and how I guess in a way, like since this is an independent film, like Hollywood almost took this idea of improv and like commodified it for like the common person so that they could enjoy it like in their own way.
I kind of wanted to talk about how it started with the four or three friends, four friends. I don't know how many it was. That like group, that gang. So it started with them in the beginning, and then it ended with them after that. They like just experienced being almost beaten to death. Then they kind of go off to like do their own thing. One of them's like, I'm gonna go get cigarettes. Like nothing happened. And the only thing I noticed that kind of went with Abby's like feeling of just loneliness was that it was shot of just the brother from like a high point, and it was just very isolating. And also that was one of the questions I wrote down was why did they do that? Like why would they start it with them and end it with him too? I don't know what you guys think. Or it means nothing, so I don't know.
I think, like, in my opinion, that brother never really found peace. He never really found, like, his place in the world. Layla ended up finding her place in the world. She found her confidence. I believe what was it, the other brother, didn't he get a gig or something? And he ended up moving to Chicago. He found his place in the world, but the other brother was sort of, like, still not really knowing what to do with his life. And so it started with the brother not knowing what to do with his life, and it ended with the brother not knowing what to do with his life. And so I think that was sort of like powerful. It's sort of like trying to communicate to the audience, like, hey, what's going to happen to him? It's supposed to like get you thinking, I think.
And I think like it pretty much goes to what Abby was saying, but like since it's an independent film, it's gonna go against Hollywood convention. So things like the 3 act structure, like they have like the denouement at the end where it's like everything's wrapped up, everything's nice. But here it's like a long lingering shot on this character where everything is very much not wrapped up. So like it's making you sit with the fact that like we don't get closure and that like this character still has like more of their story to go through before everything's solved, but we're not going to get to see that. And it like really makes you like know that fact just by like lingering on him for so long at the end.
How when we were talking about Attack the Block today, how Moses' story was technically not finished because like it ended with him getting taken away in a cop car. That's sort of like, I think it's like the same idea. Like you don't really know what's going to happen next, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a good, happy fairy tale ending.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's also really interesting how you pointed out that the first person we see, like who we assume to be the main character, at least I did, is Ben, and that's why I was really confused when it kind of sort of drifted from him to more of a background character of the main three. But he's the first person we see, and he's also the last, and he's the only one who we really don't know what was going on. We have no idea why he was behaving the way he was. We have no idea really how he identified. We don't know how he kind of. I don't even know. We don't know how he ends up. We don't know how his story ends.
Well, I think with what Katie was saying about how it kind of starts and ends with Ben, but overall he doesn't have much development and the plot isn't really about him. This might be a bit of a stretch. But, like, it made me think of like The Great Gatsby. I don't know, I said that like that. The Great Gatsby, because like in that the whole time like we're seeing things from Nick's point of view, and like you'd think he's the main character, but he's really not involved in like the action of the story. He's more of just an observer. So in the same way, like throughout this whole movie, Ben's kind of just in the background watching people have their stories, but meanwhile his story really doesn't move. But at the same time, through beginning and ending the movie with him, the audience is kind of directed to think of him as a main or maybe the main character, when largely in the action he's more of just an observer.
Yeah, I like that point a lot. I thought that was really interesting.
I think one more quick thing, it doesn't have anything super deep with it, but there were a couple jump cuts. So like a couple times in the scene, there were like some pretty clear jump cuts that they used. So that's another low budget film thing that they did.
Definitely very.
Oh my gosh! Also, I'm sorry.
No, go.
Almost the whole movie was dubbed over. Am I wrong about that?
Okay, so I was thinking that, but I was like, maybe it's just something's off.
It was preserved. I don't know if that means that it was like fixed. Maybe the audio.
Did they like remaster the audio maybe?
Right. I think you might be right about that. Yeah. That makes kind of sense.
I think one thing for like that is like ADRing audio dialogue after is a lot easier. It's almost like the black and white thing where you don't have to worry about color with ADR. You don't have to worry about like the background noise or like anything like that. And normally in a movie, they'd go back and like remake the background noise with Foley and stuff. But here they just didn't. So it's very, very striking that like, oh, this was re-recorded afterwards, since it's just their voices and we hear no other sound.
Also, because it was improv, maybe they did that because as I was watching their mouths move, even though it may have been a little off, there was also some times where they literally said completely different words than what it sounded like. So maybe in order to like fix with the improv, they like dubbed over. So if they said the wrong thing, they just dubbed over it with a different word, maybe, or something like that.
That's possible. Now you're making me want to like look into it and like look into how they dub the sound in it, because that's really interesting.
Yeah. Also, okay, did anyone catch in the fight scene? This is just random, but did anyone catch in the fight scene at the end, with like two gangs? There was literally, it's rated PG, but there was literally the word "fuck" written on the wall in huge letters.
Yeah. I want to know if that was just put there, like, for the sake of the film, or if it was just there. Like, they just went to a random alleyway and fuck was already there. I want to know.
I know, because I was like, oh my gosh, it's right there. You can't miss it. And I was just so, I don't know, I thought it was just so funny, because that day we were also talking about how, like, you can't say that word more than once. For it not to be R-rated. And I don't know, it was just like, it just really stuck out to me.
What was this movie rated? Was it rated PG-13 or like, what
PG.
was it? PG, oh.
I know, which it shouldn't have been.
But I don't think PG-13 existed then. Yeah.
Did it not exist?
I don't think so. It was more like a newer thing.
Wow. Okay, yeah, it's definitely rated PG, but
Sorry, I'm trying to see if there's anything written about like the dubbing, like the dubbing over.
Oh my god, you're right. PG-13 didn't exist until 1984.
That's so random.
That's so weird.
Yeah, that's so weird. Oh, I don't know. This doesn't really mean much, but kind of like what we were saying is it also contained a number of technical flaws, such as lip sync errors. So, like we've noticed, pretty obvious.
Yeah.
That's from Wikipedia, just so everybody knows. I didn't steal that. But yeah, that's interesting. thanks for joining us with this this week's discussion. We will hope to see you next week, or unless Hugh gives us an essay, which let's hope not.
Please don't give us an essay, Hugh.
Yeah.
Please don't. We
All
like
right.
our discussions.
Goodbye, guys. See you later.
Bye.
See ya.